In this episode of Locked On NHL Prospects, we continue our countdown to the best prospect pool in the NHL, looking at our 20th, 19th, and 18th top-ranked pools in the league, which are the Colorado Avalanche, Washington Capitals, and New Jersey Devils.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects. This episode's a bit of a different one, as will the next one, because I'm hosting it alone. So I hope you don't get tired of hearing my voice, because that's all you're getting for the rest of this week. But hopefully Hattie will be back in full health for the next week of episodes. Before we really get into it, make sure to like and subscribe and leave any thoughts and comments below on YouTube if you're watching it there. And this episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL or enter promo code LockedOnNHL for a free white tech hat with any order. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off, we promise. Now, let's start off with the Colorado Avalanche. This is a bit of a weird one. The Avs are clearly a contending team, and they probably shouldn't have cracked our top 20 rationally because they shouldn't have a very good prospect pool. And even if we would have looked at like 2 months ago, they wouldn't have cracked our top 25, let alone a top 20. But a very, very strong 2023 NHL draft really bumped them up on our board. This is a team that is already star-studded. They have their core pieces. And to that, they added two excellent prospects that are among my favorite ones to watch personally, and I'm very excited to talk about them. But they're also excellent fits for the system and the style that they are going to be playing in Colorado once or if they make the NHL. Those two players are Mikhail Gulyayev and Calum Ritchie. Let's start off with Gulyayev. This is an offensive defenseman to a T. He is a pure offensive defenseman. His defensive game can make you want to tear your hair out sometimes. It got better as the year went on, but there were still moments against MHL competition, which is a fairly weak league, both physically and in terms of quality. And he struggled sometimes in his own zone, and it got a lot worse when he was starting to play against pros. That said, he's an elite level skater, and one of the reasons that I'm hopeful with his projection is I hope that his elite base of mobility and skating will enable him to really up the value of his transition defending. We see players like other draft eligibles from 2023, like Bo Akey, who is an equally mobile but a bit lanky player who is the best transition defender in the draft class. He knows how to weaponize his mobility and his skating to match the footwork against the rush and to keep his gaps tight and to close his gaps unexpectedly and to force turnovers or at the very least apply significant pressure. Gulyayev has yet to fully embrace this style, but there is a road for him to get there, and we've seen the Avalanche do a similar thing with offensive defensemen in the past. Sam Girard improved a lot after his draft year in this facet of the game and weaponized his skating and his mobility to be a more effective defensive piece. Gulyayev will never be a shutdown defenseman, but don't get me wrong. However, if you can get his defending to a level where it's not actively hurting you in a second pairing role, I think the offense is tremendously valuable and will really make a difference. This is a player who plays with a tremendous amount of dynamism. Gulyayev routinely will weaponize his speed, his mobility, his handling in conjunction before making a tremendous pass to the slot for a teammate. He knows how to drag players out of position in order to weaponize that newfound space that his teammates sometimes use. When he was playing in the VHL, he was getting a lot more support where his small details and his creation of space was actually being used. In the MHL, that was a lot more hit or miss. But that's a very projectable quality that always excited me a ton. Now, Gulyayev did quite steadily fall down my board as the year progressed because The defensive woes gave me a bit more pause. However, Colorado is one of the best possible landing places for this player. I think that this is a team that will want to foster his offense rather than replace it with defensive ability or transition skill. But Gulyayev is tremendously exciting and a great add at the draft for the Colorado Avalanche. Calum Ritchie is an even better fit in my eyes. He embodies what the Colorado Avalanche have been wanting to establish with their depth scoring for the past couple of years. His game is based off of his intelligence, his grit, and his high-end playmaking ability. Those are three tenets that we've seen with a fair few Colorado Avalanche players. Arturi Lekin would be one, and I think that Calum Ritchie could play a similar type of role, but down the middle, which would make a big difference. Maybe a higher end JT Compher down the line. And I saw a lot of Calum Ritchie play. I live in Ottawa, and every time he was in town, I made sure to go watch him. And he was routinely the smartest player on the ice, and let alone on his own team. And he makes exceptionally quick decisions. He has an innate understanding of how to work with space and how to manipulate opponents with his off-puck movement, while also adding a ton of intensity to the mix. While he's not the highest end offensive driver on his own, he is a high-end handler, and he can problem solve in tight area situations. He can score from a bumper position on the power play, and he can assist from the half wall. He's quite versatile in the offensive zone. The one big caveat is his skating. Unlike Gulyayev, Calum Ritchie is a below par skater, and his movement is really predicated on his intelligence. Whether or not he will really rely on his skating to project to the NHL remains to be seen. Whether this is a Nick Suzuki style of player who really doesn't need to outskate his opponents to outposition them at the NHL level, or if he will actually really, really need to significantly improve his skating to play effective middle six NHL minutes. I'm not quite sure as of yet, but it did improve as the year went on, but not quite as much as I would have quite hoped for it to do. And beyond Ritchie and Gulyayev, this isn't the deepest of prospect pools, and it's also why it's a little bit of an unconventional ranking inside our top 20, because there isn't the same depth as with the previous couple teams that we've looked at in the past episodes. That said, Sean Behrens is a really interesting and fun offensive defenseman who didn't produce quite as much in the NCAA last season as I'd hoped he would, but he continues to continuously manipulate players inside the offensive zone. He's a really capable playmaker, one of the better activators from the blue line in the entirety of college hockey. And I still see number 4 defenseman upside in an offensive role with him. And he's one of my favorite, like, kind of under the radar prospects in the NHL at the moment. Jean-Luc Foudy is another player who brings a ton of skill and speed, but isn't overly consistent and can be quite overwhelmed physically at times. Oscar Olausson has fallen off the map a bit in terms of production and doesn't have the same top 6 upside that so many of us thought he did in his draft year season, but still projects as a solid bottom 6 piece. He's quite intelligent, quite toolsy, could go more along the lines of a Yoel Armia type of depth role where his style is quite fun. He can score goals quite nicely, bring some physicality and grit to the mix, and he's quite well fashioned for that bottom 6 type of role. And there are also a couple interesting goalies in the Avs pool that help bump it up a little bit, with Arvid Holm, who I think stands out. And last but not least, I'll say a quick word on Gianni Fairbrother, recently acquired from the Montreal Canadiens in that Alex Newhook trade. And this is a player who I think he has very, very little upside beyond a number 6 defenseman, but I could see him being a complimentary number 6 or 7 within the next 2 years. He plays a fairly responsible style, but was out with injury for the entirety of last season, which who knows how he's going to bounce back this year. But with a fresh start in Colorado, likely he will start with the Eagles in the AHL. I can see him becoming a decent depth contributor who just fulfills his role, adds some physicality in the defensive zone, and has a pretty good shot in the offensively. Quite limited beyond that, but decently effective in a simple role. And yeah, I think as a whole, the Avs have a better prospect pool than they should, considering that they are a contending team. And that, yeah, they clawed their way up our board, and they keep doing what Colorado does, which is good asset management. And after the break, we're going to start delving into the Washington Capitals draft pool, which has also been bolstered at the 2023 NHL draft. But first, let's talk about our sponsors at Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs make you look good. They make stretchy khaki pants and shorts that are just designed to fit you slimmer and through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. They do a similar thing to Lululemon pants, but they are less restricting in terms of movement while also looking a bit more stylish. I've really been enjoying my time with my Bird Dogs pants for the last couple days, and I've been routinely going on jogs or going out cycling, and they have great zipper pockets for my phone that does not allow my phone to like bounce around at all. I have zero worries of it falling out ever, which has been great. And Bird Dogs also use anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. Go to birddogs.com/lockedonnhl or enter promo code LockedOnNHL for a free white tech hat with your order. That is the hat that I'm wearing right now. For those on YouTube, you can see it. It's quite nice. I've really been enjoying wearing it. I've been wearing it a lot more than I was expecting to. That is birddogs.com/lockedonnhl or promo code LockedOnNHL for this free white tech hat with your order. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you that. Next up is the Washington Capitals. This is an organization that historically has not drafted particularly well from my perspective, but that completely changed in 2023. They added some really, really good pieces that really bumped them up our board in our rankings. Their pool is headlined by a fair few skilled wingers, guys like Andrew Cristall and Ryan Leonard and Ivan Murashnishenko. And if we're going down in depth, Alexander Suzdalev is also quite interesting. On the defensive side, while there aren't any slam dunk, like top pairing potential pieces, there are a lot of guys that really solidify the potential depth, especially on the right side of defense. Guys like Cameron Allen and Vinny Iorio and Ryan Chesley are all dependable two-way defensemen that still have some kinks to work out in their games, but could be all of them project as a number 4 or number 5 piece. And to have 3 of those on the right side is quite a luxury that not many teams have. And while the left side of defense in their pool is a little bit weaker, I still think that there's enough skill in this pool to justify the 19th spot in our rankings. Of course, it is headlined by recent 8th overall selection Ryan Leonard, who Capitals fans are going to adore. This is a player whose game is predicated on pure power, tremendous goal scoring ability, surprising level of agility, underrated playmaking, and fair amount of grit and good defensive engagement. He is really well-rounded in a really high-end way. This is a player who could become a complementary top-line power forward with time and will be able to learn a ton from guys like Alex Ovechkin and Tom Wilson in how to most effectively use his physicality to create advantages against NHL competition. And he's one of my favorite players from the 2023 draft. Every single time I went to scout him, I got giddy inside. He just brings me joy to watch play, and I think a lot of Capitals fans are going to agree with that once he hits the NHL. Ryan Leonard really can do so much on the ice, and he contributes in a far greater variety of ways than his 2 NTDP line mates did. Will Smith and Gabe Perreault are both a lot more limited in how they are effective. Ryan Leonard, while yes, he is a power forward goal scorer first and foremost, he is also a skilled playmaker and a strong handler. And he has had end-to-end rushes where he goes with a toe drag to get around the last defenseman. He's really shifty and intelligent and consistently gets to the right position at the right time, He's a very effective power play piece, and I think he fits Washington's plans and style perfectly. And I'm also really happy that they picked him 8th overall because it opened them up to taking a bigger risk in the second round with Andrew Cristall. Andrew Cristall embodies pure skill. He can do just about anything he wants with the puck on his stick, but he has yet to learn how to quite leverage that to be as effective as possible and as consistent as possible. Even against WHL competition, there were times where it looked like pond hockey with Andrew Cristall, where he's going around the offensive zone and doing whatever he wants, but he's not really creating advantages. He's kind of just flashing his skill and being skillful for the sake of being skillful rather than being skillful in order to score. And that said, I really am a big believer in this player. I had him ranked top 15 for a reason. This is a risk for sure. They spent a high draft pick to get this asset, and there's a definite chance that he never touches the NHL. However, in the second round, I think this is more than worth the risk. Andrew Cristall could be a slam dunk first line offensive driver if he pans out. The defensive game is bad. It needs a ton of work. He's going to need to be insulated at 5-on-5 to not get shelled defensively. However, this is a player who could genuinely be a 100-point scorer in the future. There is that upside. And for that reason, he's one of the most fascinating case studies in the 2023 NHL draft. And I think Washington did tremendously well to add him where they did. Ivan Miroshnichenko is another really good player who, while I think he got drafted a little bit higher than I would have been comfortable picking him last season, he fits Washington very, very well as well. He is so toolsy. He brings a lot of physicality and great goal scoring to the mix. He's a great handler. And it looks, from my perspective, that the Capitals are kind of pivoting their drafting strategy now in the past couple of years. Where in the past they were going for pure physicality, they are now going for toolsy physicality, which in my view is a massive upgrade in terms of upside potential. Both Miroshnichenko and Ryan Leonard could be top 6 caliber power forwards, and those are exciting pieces to add to the mix. Beyond those names, there's quite a few defensemen that I quite like in the Capitals pool. All three of them are right shots, which is a nice luxury. They're going to be able to flip one of them in the future if they feel the need to, considering all three of these players, in my mind, project as future number 4s and number 5s. And those are Cam Allen, recently picked way later than he should have gone. Me and Hattie have gone on and on about that on this podcast. We really believe there's an overcorrection in his draft stock. And then also Vinny Iorio, who's already started to get a couple NHL minutes at the end of last season and looked decent enough and brings some good physicality to the mix and is a fairly strong breakout passer. And Ryan Chesley, who got drafted a lot later than I was expecting in 2022. And I thought there's a chance that he'd be a top 15 selection, and he dropped all the way to the second round, which is where I had him ranked, but was not really where I expected him to go. He is a player who also brings a good amount of defensive solidity, quite dependable in his own zone. He will consistently defend the slot, and he can make a good first pass, and he has a very heavy shot in the offensive zone. All three of these players have a fair few similarities, and I don't think the Caps will be able to hold on to all three of them if they continue to progress well, but they are good assets to have. Beyond that, I think Hendrix Lapierre is still an interesting, skilled player, but the more time passes, the more questions I have on his projectability. I think the skill and the playmaking are really exciting, but the pace of execution is still a bit of a question mark in my eyes. And Alexander Suzdalev had a great season in Regina last year, playing with Connor Bedard and Tanner Howe. But I still have a couple questions on how he projects to the NHL level. However, his D+1 season was a significant step forward, and he definitely deserves a mention in this prospect pool breakdown. But as a whole, I think the Capitals have a strong prospect pool that was really bolstered in 2023 with that high-end offensive talent. And yeah, it's a bit of a turning of the page now. I'm curious to see if the Caps continue with this strategy for the next couple drafts, if they continue to try to acquire draft picks and double down on this new approach of building a new core. It is exciting to see, and I think that there are far worse pieces to start off with when building a core than Ryan Leonard and Andrew Cristall. So the Capitals are quite solidly at 19th on our ranking of NHL prospect pools. And after this, we're going to start jumping into the New Jersey Devils prospect pool, one of the weirdest and most interesting ones in the league. The Devils are a strange one, and because I've struggled to really pin them down in terms of our actual ranking, because there is very little depth in their pool. That said, they have Luke Hughes and Simon Nemec, which changes a lot. Those are big factors that really, really, really change the outlook of a team. They have Luke Hughes, Simon Nemec, and Seamus Casey. Those are 3 high-end offensive defensemen. Well, Nemec a bit less so. That bring a lot of potential to the future lineup of the Devils, who already have a fairly decent defensive core. Luke Hughes has the most skill of the bunch. He's already played playoff minutes in the NHL, and we're just throwing him in here in the mix because he hasn't actually hit our minimum requirement of 10 regular season games just yet. And he finished off a tremendous career at the University of Michigan with a bit of a bitter defeat to Quinnipiac in the Frozen Four, but this is a player who can really dominate games in the offensive zone. He willingly activates, and while his defensive game is already a big step up from his brother Quinn, it still will need work. It will need steady progression over the next couple of years in order for him to earn a true top pairing role. But the offensive skill and the deception and the planning with the puck and even the off puck movement in the offensive zone, willingly activating and attacking empty space, is all really, really exciting for the Devils organization and their fan base. Simon Nemec is a very different type of defenseman, very different stylistically. This is not a player who is going to dazzle you with tremendous handling ability and offensive activations. That said, he is a strong offensive distributor and has a very good shot from the point. And defensively, he has a couple moments here and there that aren't the best, but for the most part is fairly reliable, especially for his age, considering he's playing in the AHL as an 18, 19-year-old. And he's progressed well as a D+1. I had him ranked, I believe, 10th on my board in 2022, and I kind of stick by that. I think he's treading water with how he's done. I think he's a very promising piece. And while I think second overall was still a bit of a reach on him, there is the passing ability and the transition skill and the intelligence that could really, really justify that draft position in a couple years' time. I'm not closing the door on that whatsoever. And Seamus Casey is another one, not quite the same tier as Luke Hughes and Simon Nemec. However, he is a dynamic offensive defenseman, also at Michigan, who is a great power play quarterback, a high-end offensive playmaker, really, really deft skill with the puck on his stick, great small area problem-solving ability, and as a whole, one of my favorite offensive defensemen not in the NHL as of yet. So the Devils are really quite set with their high-end defensive pieces moving forward. But it drops off a little bit more when you delve beyond that in the prospect pool, and it's why 18th is kind of where they've settled. And I think it could have been anywhere in a range of 5 rankings from this spot that could have been justified, because it's such a peculiar prospect pool, because they shipped off all of their B-level prospects in previous trades, mainly to acquire Timo Meier. But in terms of players that qualify for our definition of prospect, Samu Salminen still has some decent potential as a bottom 6 depth scorer. I think Josh Philman is a good selection. He dropped a lot further in the draft than he should have in 2022 and really upped his production as a D+1. He's quite lanky, but quite toolsy, has a good shot, decent handler. And while he's far from a lock of being an NHLer in the future, he was a really good depth selection. Lini Haminaho is another player who I quite liked as a prospect, but thought that got drafted a little bit higher than he should have gone in 2023. This is a guy who produced very well in Liga as a draft year player, but he's quite limited to just being a goal scorer. His passing game, his distribution, his dynamism, his deception are all tools that I see as a bit subpar. Defensively, there are games where he tries a bit and is decently effective, but for the most part is fairly passive. And yeah, I think Chase Stillman's another skilled CHL player who could progress further with a couple years, but I'm starting to have a bit more questions as time passes. But yeah, it's a fascinating prospect pool. I think, especially if you start delving into the goaltenders as well, who aren't officially prospects by our criteria, like Nico Dawes, but who didn't play in the NHL at all last season. So I'll throw him in the mix as an option here. This is a pool with a couple really high-end pieces and very little beyond that, which is a really interesting type of prospect pool, quite different from the other ones that we've looked at so far. But in our minds, they are the 18th best pool in the NHL. And that wraps up this episode of Locked On NHL Prospects. Hopefully, you will come back again on Friday for our 17th, 16th, and 15th top prospect pools in the league, which are all Southern U.S. teams, as a little hint. And that said, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again very soon.